Her small hands carefully turned the pages of a thick book titled The History of Buckingham Palace. Emma had already read this book 3 times, but she still found new details every time she opened it. The pictures of the royal guards fascinated her the most. These tall men in their bright red uniforms and enormous black fuzzy hats looked like characters from a fairy tale. But Emma knew they were real soldiers who protected the Queen and the royal family. Emma had learned that these guards were called the Queen's Guard, and they had been protecting the royal family for hundreds of years. She discovered that they came from 5 different regiments of the British Army. The guards had to stand perfectly still for hours without moving, talking, or even smiling. Emma thought this must be very difficult, especially when tourists tried to make them laugh or took silly pictures with them. Her mother Sarah often found Emma reading these books late into the evening. Sarah worked as a nurse at the local hospital and had been saving money for this London trip for 3 years. She wanted to give Emma something special since Emma had always been such a good student and helped take care of her younger brother while Sarah worked long shifts. Emma had made a detailed list of everything she wanted to see in London. At the top of her list was watching the changing of the guard ceremony at Buckingham Palace. She had watched videos of this ceremony online dozens of times. The precision and discipline of the guards amazed her. Every step they took was exactly the same. Every movement was perfectly timed. Emma had even tried to march like them in her backyard, much to the amusement of her neighbors. The ceremony happened every other day at 11:30 in the morning. Emma had already planned their entire schedule around this timing. She wanted to arrive early to get the best viewing spot. She had read that thousands of tourists came to watch this ceremony, so finding a good place to stand was very important. Emma had also been learning about British culture and customs. She learned that the guards wore different colored plumes on their hats depending on which regiment they belonged to. The Grenadier Guards wore white plumes, the Coldstream Guards wore red plumes, and the Scots Guards wore no plumes at all. Emma had memorized all these details because she wanted to identify which guards she was seeing during the ceremony. One evening, while Emma was reading, her mother sat down beside her on the bed. Sarah noticed that Emma had been spending all her free time preparing for this trip. Most children would be excited about going to theme parks or buying souvenirs, but Emma was genuinely interested in the history and traditions they would witness. Sarah asked Emma why she was so fascinated by the royal guards. Emma explained that she admired how dedicated and disciplined they were. She told her mother that these guards had an important job protecting people, and they took their responsibility very seriously. Emma said she wanted to learn about their traditions because she respected what they did. Emma had also been practicing her British accent by watching documentaries and British television shows. She wanted to be able to communicate well with local people during their visit. Her teacher at school had encouraged this interest and had given Emma additional books about British history to read. The most special part of Emma's preparation was choosing what to wear for the ceremony. She had saved her allowance money for 6 months to buy a beautiful red dress that matched the color of the guards' uniforms. Emma felt that wearing red would show her respect and appreciation for the guards. She had also bought a small British flag to wave during the ceremony. Emma's bedroom walls were covered with pictures of Buckingham Palace, the royal guards, and maps of London. She had created her own guidebook with drawings and notes about everything she wanted to see. Her younger brother Carlos often teased her about being obsessed with soldiers, but Emma did not mind. She knew that this trip would be the adventure of a lifetime. As their departure date approached, Emma became more and more excited. She had packed and repacked her suitcase several times, making sure she had her guidebook, her camera, and her special red dress. She had also written down important phrases in British English and had learned about London's public transportation system. Emma's teacher had asked her to keep a journal during the trip and share her experiences with the class when she returned. Emma was thrilled about this assignment because she loved writing and wanted to remember every detail of their London adventure. She had already started writing in her journal, describing her preparations and her excitement about finally seeing the royal guards in person. The night before their flight, Emma could barely sleep. She kept imagining what it would feel like to stand in front of Buckingham Palace and watch the guards perform their ceremony. She wondered if the guards ever got tired of standing so still, and if they ever noticed the children in the crowd watching them with such admiration. Emma had read that the guards were trained to ignore distractions and focus completely on their duties. But she hoped that maybe, just maybe, one of them might notice a little girl in a red dress who had traveled thousands of miles, just to see them perform their important work. Emma fell asleep that night, dreaming of red uniforms, black hats, and the grand gates of Buckingham Palace. Emma carried her small backpack, filled with all her research materials and her camera. She had been awake for most of the 8-hour flight, reading her guidebooks one more time and looking at pictures of Buckingham Palace. The other passengers probably thought she was the most prepared 8-year-old tourist they had ever seen. After collecting their luggage, Emma and her mother took the underground train into central London. Emma was fascinated by the subway system, which was much older and different from anything she had seen back home. The tunnels were narrow, and the trains made interesting sounds as they moved through the underground passages.
Emma carefully studied
the map on the wall, trying to memorize the route to their hotel. Their small hotel was located just 15 minutes walking distance from Buckingham Palace. Emma had specifically asked her mother to choose this location even though it cost more money. She wanted to be close to where the royal guards worked so they could visit multiple times during their week-long stay. As soon as they checked into their hotel room, Emma wanted to walk to Buckingham Palace immediately. Sarah suggested they should rest after the long flight, but Emma was too excited to sleep. She promised her mother they would only walk around the outside of the palace and come back quickly. Sarah could not resist Emma's enthusiasm, so they decided to take a short walk. The first sight of Buckingham Palace took Emma's breath away. The building was much larger than she had imagined. From pictures, the golden gates sparkled in the afternoon sunlight, and the British flags flew proudly from the roof. Emma stood very still for several minutes, just staring at the magnificent palace where the Queen lived and worked. But what made Emma's heart race with excitement were the 2 royal guards standing motionless at their posts beside the palace gates. These were real royal guards, not pictures in a book or videos on the internet. Emma could see their red uniforms, their shiny black boots, and their tall bearskin hats. They stood perfectly straight, looking ahead with serious expressions on their faces. Emma walked closer to the gates, being very careful to stay behind the barrier that separated tourists from the guards. She wanted to observe everything about how they stood and how they held their rifles. The guards seemed like statues, except for the occasional blink of their eyes. Emma was amazed by their discipline and concentration. Other tourists were taking pictures, and some were trying to make the guards smile or react. Emma felt embarrassed by this behavior. She had read that the guards were working and performing an important duty. Making fun of them or trying to distract them seemed disrespectful to Emma. She wished other people understood how serious and important the guards' job was. Emma noticed that the guards had small movements and signals that most people did not see. Sometimes one guard would slightly move his eyes to look at something. Sometimes they would adjust their grip on their rifles in a very subtle way. Realized that even though they appeared to be standing completely still, they were actually very alert and aware of everything happening around them. Her mother suggested they walk around the entire perimeter of the palace to see the different guard posts. Emma discovered that guards were stationed at several locations around the palace grounds. Some stood alone, while others stood in pairs. Each guard maintained the same perfect posture and serious expression, regardless of where they were positioned. During their walk, Emma overheard a tour guide explaining the history of the royal guards to a small group of visitors. The guide mentioned that the guards used special hand signals to communicate with each other when they could not speak. This information fascinated Emma because she had not read about this in any of her books. That evening, back at their hotel, Emma immediately began researching guard communication signals on her tablet. She discovered that the guards had developed a system of subtle gestures and movements to share important information, without breaking their ceremonial silence. Some signals were used to indicate potential security concerns, while others were used for basic communication between guards. Emma found several military websites that described some of these signals. She learned that guards could indicate when they needed assistance, when they spotted something suspicious, or when they needed to relay messages to their supervisors. The signals were designed to be almost invisible to the general public, but clearly understood by other guards and security personnel. Emma spent hours studying these communication methods. She practiced the different hand positions and gestures in front of the hotel room mirror. Her mother thought Emma was playing a game, but Emma was seriously trying to understand how the guards maintained security while following their ceremonial protocols. The next morning, Emma woke up early, eager to return to Buckingham Palace. Today was the day of the changing of the guard ceremony. Emma put on her special red dress and made sure her camera was ready. She had studied the ceremony schedule and knew they needed to arrive by 10:30 to get a good viewing position. Emma and her mother joined the growing crowd of tourists gathering outside the palace gates. Emma was surprised by how many people came to watch the ceremony. There were families with children, elderly couples, and tour groups from many different countries. Everyone seemed excited to witness this famous British tradition. Emma managed to find a spot near the front of the crowd, where she had a clear view of the palace gates. She could see the guards who would soon be participating in the ceremony. Emma felt proud to be wearing her red dress, which matched their uniforms. She hoped the guards might notice her respectful tribute to their service. As the ceremony time approached, Emma noticed increased activity around the palace. Additional guards appeared at various positions and security personnel became more visible in the crowd. Emma realized that the ceremony required extensive coordination and preparation. This was not just a tourist attraction, but a serious military procedure that happened with precision and professionalism. Emma had positioned herself carefully behind the metal barriers where she could see the main courtyard of the palace. She was shorter than most of the adults around her, but she had found a small gap between two families where she could see clearly. Her red dress stood out among the crowd, and she felt special knowing she had chosen it to honor the guards. At exactly 11:15, the first sounds of military music began echoing from inside the palace grounds. Emma's heart started beating faster as she recognized the tune from the video she had watched online. The band was approaching, and soon the ceremony would begin. Emma checked her camera to make sure it was ready to capture this once-in-a-lifetime moment. The new guard marched into view, first led by their regimental band. Emma counted approximately 40 guards walking in perfect formation. Their red tunics were spotless, and their black bearskin hats stood tall and proud. Each guard carried a rifle and maintained the same serious expression that Emma had admired the day before. Emma noticed that the guards' movements were incredibly precise. Every step was exactly the same length, and every guard lifted his feet to the exact same height. Their arms swung in perfect rhythm and their heads remained straight ahead. Emma had practiced marching in her backyard, but seeing the real guards made her realize how much training and discipline was required. The band played traditional military marches as the new guard took their positions in the palace courtyard. Emma recognized some of the songs from her research, including British Grenadiers and Rule Britannia. The music made the ceremony feel even more important and official. Emma felt goosebumps on her arms as she watched the pageantry unfold before her eyes. Then the old guard, who had been on duty for the past 2 hours, began their part of the ceremony. These guards had been standing motionless at their posts since early morning, and Emma wondered if they were tired or relieved to finally move again. But their faces showed no emotion, and their movements remained perfectly controlled. Emma watched carefully as the two groups of guards performed the handover procedure. The officers from each group met in the center of the courtyard and formally exchanged responsibility for guarding the palace. Emma could not hear their words because of the distance and crowd noise, but she could see that they followed a very specific protocol. During the ceremony, Emma began scanning the crowd around her with the same attention to detail she had used while studying the guards. Most people were taking pictures or videos, but Emma noticed some individuals who seemed different from typical tourists. Some were watching the ceremony more seriously, while others kept looking around at the crowd instead of focusing on the guards. One man in particular caught Emma's attention. He was standing about 20 feet away from her, wearing a dark jacket and baseball cap. Unlike other tourists who were laughing and taking selfies, this man seemed nervous and kept checking his phone. Emma noticed that he was not watching the ceremony at all, but instead kept looking at the guards' positions and timing their movements. Emma tried to dismiss her concerns, thinking maybe the man was just not interested in the ceremony. But something about his behavior made her feel uncomfortable. The man kept moving closer to the barriers, and Emma saw him reach into his jacket pocket several times as if he was checking for something important. The ceremony continued with the guards performing their traditional drill movements. Tried to focus on the beautiful pageantry, but she found herself glancing back at the suspicious man. She noticed that he had moved even closer to the front of the crowd and was now positioned where he could easily access the area near the palace gates. Emma remembered reading about security concerns at tourist attractions around the world. She had learned that large crowds gathered for public events could sometimes attract people with bad intentions. Emma's mother had always taught her to trust her instincts and speak up if something felt wrong, and the man's behavior became more concerning as the ceremony progressed. Emma saw him take out his phone and appear to be timing something while watching the guards. He kept looking at his watch and then back at the guards as if he was coordinating his actions with their schedule. Emma realized that someone planning to disrupt the ceremony would need to know exactly when and where the guards would be positioned. Emma also noticed that the man was carrying a backpack, which seemed unusual for someone just watching a ceremony. Most tourists carried cameras or small bags, but his backpack appeared heavy and full. Emma began to worry that the bag might contain something dangerous that could harm the guards or other people in the crowd. As these thoughts raced through Emma's mind, she remembered the hand signals she had studied the night before. Emma had learned that the guards used specific gestures to communicate security concerns without alerting potential troublemakers. She wondered if she should try to signal one of the guards about the suspicious man. Emma looked around to see if any adults near her had noticed the man's strange behavior, but everyone seemed focused on taking pictures and enjoying the ceremony. Her mother was busy recording videos to show Emma's little brother back home. Emma realized that she might be the only person who had observed the man's suspicious actions. The ceremony was reaching its climax as the old guard prepared to march away from the palace. Emma knew this would be the perfect time for someone to cause a disruption because the guards would be moving and their attention would be focused on completing the ceremony properly. Emma felt a growing sense of urgency about the situation. Emma made a decision that would require all the courage she could gather. She had traveled thousands of miles to see these guards, and she respected them too much to let someone potentially harm them or ruin their ceremony. Emma began moving through the crowd, trying to get close enough to one of the guards to use the communication signals she had memorized. The man in the dark jacket was now only about 10 feet away from the metal barriers that separated the crowd from the palace courtyard. Emma could see him more clearly now, and noticed that he was sweating despite the cool London weather. Eyes kept darting between his phone and the guards, and he seemed to be counting something under his breath. Emma tried to catch her mother's attention, but Sarah was completely focused on recording the ceremony with her camera. She was determined to capture every moment of this special experience for Emma's little brother back home. Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve, but Sarah just smiled and whispered for Emma to watch the beautiful ceremony. The 8-year-old girl realized she would have to handle this situation by herself. Emma had never been in a scary situation like this before, but she remembered all the stories. She had read about brave children who helped adults when something was wrong. Emma took a deep breath and reminded herself that the guards were counting on everyone to help keep them safe. Emma began carefully moving through the crowd, trying to get closer to one of the guards, who was standing at attention near the palace gates. She had to squeeze between families and step around people who were sitting on the ground. Some adults looked annoyed when Emma pushed past them, but she knew this was an emergency situation. As Emma moved closer to the front of the crowd, she kept glancing back at the suspicious man. She saw him reach into his jacket pocket and pull out what looked like a small device. Emma's heart started beating even faster because she was afraid. The device might be something dangerous that could hurt people. Emma finally reached a position where she was only about 15 feet away from the nearest guard. This guard was a tall man with a serious expression who was standing perfectly still while holding his rifle. Emma knew that the guard was not supposed to move or speak during the ceremony, but she hoped he would notice her signal. Emma remembered the hand signals she had studied so carefully the night before. The signal for immediate assistance needed was a quick touch of the left hand to the right shoulder, followed by pointing toward the source of concern. Emma had practiced this gesture many times in front of the hotel mirror, but doing it for real felt completely different. Emma looked directly at the guard and waited until she was sure he could see her. The guard's eyes were looking straight ahead as he was trained to do, but Emma noticed that he seemed aware of her presence. She took another deep breath and slowly performed the signal she had memorized, touching her left hand to her right shoulder. The guard's eyes moved slightly in Emma's direction, but his face remained completely expressionless. Emma was not sure if he had understood her signal, so she repeated the gesture, and then pointed as clearly as she could toward the suspicious man in the crowd. Emma's small hand was shaken as she pointed, but she tried to be as precise as possible. For a moment nothing seemed to happen, and Emma worried that the guard had not understood her message. Then she noticed something amazing. The guard's eyes had shifted to look exactly where Emma had pointed, and she could see that he was now observing the suspicious man carefully. Emma watched as the guard made his own subtle signal to another guard who was positioned nearby. The second guard also began watching the man in the dark jacket. Emma realized that the guards were communicating with each other using the same type of signals she had used to alert them. The suspicious man seemed to sense that something had changed because he began looking around nervously. Emma saw him check his phone again and then look directly at the guards. The man appeared to realize that the guards were now paying attention to him instead of just performing their ceremony duties. Emma noticed that other security personnel who were not dressed as ceremonial guards had also begun moving closer to the suspicious man's location. These people were wearing regular clothes, but Emma could tell they were working with the royal guards to keep everyone safe during the ceremony. The man in the dark jacket suddenly seemed very uncomfortable and began backing away from the barriers. Emma watched as he tried to blend into the crowd and move toward the edge of the gathering, but Emma could see that the security personnel were following him and keeping him under observation. Emma felt a mixture of relief and pride as she realized that her signal had worked exactly as she had hoped. The guards had understood her message and had taken action to investigate the suspicious person. Emma had helped protect the ceremony, and all the people who had come to watch it. The changing of the guard ceremony continued without any disruption. The old guard marched away from the palace in their perfect formation while the military band played traditional songs. The new guard took their positions and began their 2-hour duty shift protecting the royal family. Emma tried to focus on enjoying the rest of the ceremony, but she kept watching the area where the suspicious man had been standing. She could see that the security personnel were still monitoring the situation and making sure that everyone remained safe. When the ceremony officially ended and the crowd began to disperse, Emma felt exhausted from the stress and excitement of what had just happened. She had come to London to watch the royal guards perform their duties, and she had ended up helping them perform those duties more effectively. Emma's mother finally noticed that her daughter seemed unusually quiet and asked if everything was okay. Emma was not sure how to explain what had just happened because it all seemed so unreal. She had used knowledge from her research to communicate with professional soldiers and had potentially helped prevent a dangerous situation. As they walked away from Buckingham Palace, Emma kept thinking about the responsibility that the royal guards carried every day. They were not just performing a ceremony for tourists, but were actually protecting important people and places. Emma felt honored that she had been able to help them, even in a small way. Emma noticed that the royal guards had maintained their ceremonial positions, but their alertness had clearly increased. Even though they continued to stand perfectly still, their eyes were more active, and they seemed to be scanning the crowd more carefully. Emma felt proud that her signal had helped them become aware of the potential threat without disrupting their important ceremony. The suspicious man suddenly broke into a fast walk, heading toward one of the side streets that led away from Buckingham Palace. Security officers immediately responded by closing the distance between themselves and the man. Emma could see that they were speaking into small communication devices, probably coordinating with other security personnel in the area. Emma's mother, Sarah, finally noticed that her daughter was not paying attention to the end of the ceremony, but was instead watching something happening in the crowd. Sarah followed Emma's gaze and saw the commotion near the edge of the tourist gathering. She asked Emma what was happening, but Emma was not sure how to explain the situation. Before Emma could answer her mother's question, one of the security officers approached the suspicious man and began speaking to him. Emma was too far away to hear their conversation, but she could see that the man appeared nervous and agitated. The officer was asking questions, and the man was shaking his head and gesturing with his hands. The second security officer had positioned himself on the other side of the man so that he could not easily escape if he tried to run away. Emma realized that these officers were highly trained professionals who knew exactly how to handle potentially dangerous situations without causing panic among the innocent tourists nearby. Emma watched as the first officer asked the man to open his backpack for inspection. The man hesitated for several seconds before slowly removing the backpack from his shoulders. Emma held her breath as the officer carefully examined the contents of the bag. She could not see what was inside, but the officer's serious expression suggested that he had found something concerning. The officer immediately spoke into his communication device again, and within minutes, additional security personnel arrived. At the scene, Emma counted at least 4 more officers who surrounded the unauspicious man in a way that looked casual to other tourists, but was clearly a professional security operation. Emma saw the officers escort the man away from the crowd toward a nearby security building. The man was not handcuffed, but he was clearly not free to leave on his own. Emma felt relieved that the situation was being handled properly and that no one had been hurt during the process. As the crowd continued to disperse, Emma noticed that one of the royal guards was looking in her direction. This was the same guard who had received her signal about the suspicious man. The guard maintained his ceremonial posture, but Emma could see in his eyes that he was acknowledging her contribution to resolving the situation. Emma felt a warm feeling of satisfaction knowing that her months of research and preparation had actually helped protect people. She had learned about the guard's communication signals out of curiosity and respect, but had never imagined she would need to use that knowledge in a real emergency situation. Sarah suggested they return to their hotel so Emma could rest after the exciting morning. As they walked away from Buckingham Palace, Emma kept thinking about what had just happened. She wondered what the man had been planning to do and whether her alert had prevented something dangerous from occurring. Back at their hotel, Emma sat on the bed and tried to process everything she had experienced. She had come to London as a tourist, excited to see the royal guards perform their ceremony. But she had ended up participating in their security operations. By using skills she had learned through her own research and preparation, Emma decided to write about the experience in the journal she was keeping for her school project. She wrote about how important it was to pay attention to what was happening around her, and to trust her instincts when something seemed wrong. Emma also wrote about how proud she felt to have helped the guards who she admired so much. Afternoon, Emma and her mother returned to Buckingham Palace, hoping to see the guards again. Emma wanted to observe their normal duties when there were no ceremonies taking place. She was curious to see if the guards would remember her from the morning's incident. When they arrived at the palace, Emma saw that different guards were now on duty. These guards had replaced the ones who had been working during the ceremony. Emma realized that the guards worked in shifts, and that protecting the royal family was a continuous responsibility that required many different people working together. Emma spent the afternoon watching the guards and thinking about their important work. She noticed that even when there were no ceremonies taking place, the guards remained completely alert and professional. They continued to use their subtle communication signals to stay in contact with each other and with the security personnel around the palace. As evening approached, Emma and her mother prepared to return to their hotel. Emma took one last look at the royal guards who were standing at their posts in the growing darkness. She felt a special connection to these dedicated soldiers who had accepted her help when it was needed. That night, Emma had trouble falling asleep because she kept thinking about the day's events. She wondered if she would ever learn what the suspicious man had been planning, or whether the authorities would want to speak with her about what she had observed. Emma also wondered if the royal guards would remember the little girl in the red dress who had helped them during the ceremony. Laura wrote in her journal that she felt different after helping with the security situation.
Ow.
She realized that even children could make important contributions when they paid attention and were willing to act responsibly. Emma felt more confident and mature, knowing that her knowledge and observations had actually helped protect people in a real situation. Emma felt nervous but excited as she sat across from Captain Morrison in the hotel lobby. The captain was a tall, distinguished man with gray hair and kind eyes. He wore a dark blue uniform with several medals and ribbons that showed his years of military service. Emma had never spoken to such an important military officer before. Captain Morrison explained that the security team had reviewed the events of the previous day and had determined that Emma's alert had been crucial in preventing a serious incident. The suspicious man had been carrying materials that could have been used to disrupt the ceremony and potentially harm people in the crowd. Emma's quick thinking and knowledge of guard communication signals had helped security personnel respond before any damage could be done. The captain told Emma that the man had been planning to throw paint at the royal guards during the ceremony, as a form of protest. While this might not have physically hurt anyone, it would have been very disrespectful to the guards and could have caused panic among the tourists. The man had also been carrying equipment to record his actions and post them on social media. Emma felt relieved to learn that the man had not been planning anything more dangerous, but she also felt proud that she had helped prevent even this smaller disruption. She told Captain Morrison about her months of research and how she had learned about the guard communication signals through her own curiosity and respect for the royal guards. Captain Morrison was amazed by Emma's dedication to learning about British military traditions. He explained that very few civilians knew about the guards' hand signals, and that Emma's knowledge was quite remarkable for someone her age. The captain said that Emma had demonstrated the same kind of alertness and responsibility that the guards themselves were trained to maintain. The captain asked Emma if she would like to meet some of the guards who had been on duty during yesterday's ceremony. Emma's eyes lit up with excitement as she nodded enthusiastically. Captain Morrison explained that the guards wanted to thank Emma personally for her help and to show her some areas of their work that tourists normally never got to see. Emma and her mother were escorted to a special entrance of Buckingham Palace that was reserved for official visitors. Emma could hardly believe she was actually going inside the palace where the Queen lived and worked. The hallways were decorated with beautiful paintings and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Captain Morrison led them to a room where 3 royal guards were waiting out of their ceremonial uniforms. Emma recognized one of them as the guard who had received her signal during the ceremony. The guards introduced themselves and explained that they had all been impressed by Emma's knowledge and quick thinking. Sergeant Williams was the guard who had first noticed Emma's signal. He told Emma that in his 15 years of service, he had never encountered a civilian who understood their communication system so well. He explained that Emma's signal had been performed perfectly and that he had immediately understood that she was alerting him to a security concern. The guards showed Emma some of the equipment they used during their duties, including their rifles, ceremonial swords, and the famous bearskin hats. Emma learned that each hat was made from the fur of Canadian black bears and could weigh up to 2 pounds. The guards explained how they maintained their equipment and kept their uniforms in perfect condition. Emma was fascinated to learn about the guards' training process. The guards told her that they spent months learning how to march in perfect formation, stand motionless for hours, and perform their ceremonial duties with precision. They also received training in security procedures and emergency response, which had helped them react properly to Emma's alert. Captain Morrison presented Emma with a special certificate recognizing her contribution to palace security. The certificate was signed by the commanding officer of the Royal Guards and stated that Emma Rodriguez had demonstrated exceptional awareness and civic responsibility during the changing of the guard ceremony. Emma felt tears of pride forming in her eyes as she held the beautiful document. The guards also gave Emma a special badge that showed the emblem of the Royal Guards Regiment. Captain Morrison explained that this badge was normally only given to people who had served with the regiment or had made significant contributions to their mission. Emma would be one of the youngest people ever to receive such an honor. Emma was invited to watch the next day's changing of the guard ceremony from a special viewing area that was reserved for VIP guests. From this location, she would have a perfect view of the entire ceremony without having to stand in the crowded tourist areas. Emma felt like she was being treated like royalty herself. Captain Morrison asked Emma about her future plans and whether she had ever considered a career in military service or security work. Emma explained that she was still just 8 years old and had not decided what she wanted to do when she grew up. But she said that meeting the Royal Guards had made her very interested in jobs that involved protecting people and serving her country. Before leaving the palace, Emma and her mother were given a private tour of some areas that were normally closed to the public. They saw the guard rooms where the soldiers prepared for their duties and learned about the history of the Royal Guards Regiment. Emma felt honored to be trusted with access to these special areas of the palace. As they prepared to leave, Captain Morrison told Emma that she would always be welcome to visit the Royal Guards whenever she returned to London. He said that Emma had earned the respect and friendship of the entire regiment through her actions and her genuine appreciation for their service. That evening, Emma sat in her hotel room, looking at her certificate and badge while writing in her journal. She wrote that this trip to London had been even more amazing than she had ever dreamed it could be. Emma had not only seen the Royal Guards perform their duties, but had actually helped them fulfill their mission of protecting people and maintaining security. Emma realized that her months of research and preparation had led to something much more meaningful than just being a well-informed tourist. She had learned that knowledge combined with courage and responsibility could make a real difference in important situations. Emma felt proud to have earned the respect of the Royal Guards and excited to share her story with her classmates when she returned home.